All right, today we're going to dive into really kind of the infrastructure about what is helping the crypto trading markets start to kind of evolve because we have a lot of different applications in potential use case scenario, whether it's new banks, new trading houses, institutions that are really getting ready for what we think is going to be a big push into crypto trading for retail investors. And that's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to TechPath. Joining me today is Ian McAfee, who is the co-founder and CEO of Shift Markets and Nexus Markets. Great to have you on the show, Ian.
Thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Where do we find you today? Where is Shift?
Well, I'm in New York today. We office is a little thinned out with COVID, but we're based here in New York. We've got about 70, 75 people globally, but most of the
Hmm.
management and senior people in New York.
Very cool. Ian, let's get into a little bit about Shift Markets, what you guys are trying to bring out to the industry in terms of services, technology, protocol, et cetera. I know you've got a few new products that are getting ready to or close to coming to market. Tell me a little bit about where Shift is today.
Sure. So our background is traditional finance, and we started in FX. So company started in '09. Um, But once I think Bitcoin hit 800, I'm like, we have to really move into crypto. It was probably 2016 or so, if I remember correctly. Um, so we built the platform that lets people get into the space, which is what we were doing in FX, where someone could come to us and license our tech to run a trading
Right.
venue. And as you can imagine, maybe early 2017, late 2017, there was a lot of entrepreneurs getting into the space, and that's evolved quite a bit. Today, we're kind of moving a little more up market as institutions are moving more towards kind of trying to prevent users from going to other exchanges and banks.
Right.
Um, we're moving a little more towards the institutional side of things, and we have some pretty cool things that we're doing there.
That is something we've talked about on the show over the past couple of weeks, really, is kind of this transition of the retail consumer worldwide, in reference to just
Yeah.
seeing the activity that's happening in DeFi. It's pushing a lot of bank and institutional customers into DeFi. We're seeing activity within to direct trading, which is obviously pushing them over to the centralized exchanges, whether it's a Coinbase, a Kraken, et cetera. When you look at the institutional framework today, whether it's banks, institutional capital, traditional trading houses, et cetera, do you feel like this is, are we at a point yet where maybe it is the tipping point where these organizations are truly dedicated to moving into the crypto markets yet?
I think so, especially if we see a move up in the price in the next few weeks. It's just they can no longer ignore, I think, what's happening. Um, there's been a lot of infrastructure missing from the space,
Yeah.
and that's prevented a lot of people getting in. I think that's changing, and companies like ours and like others, like custody providers, make it easier for people to move into the space. And I think we'll see a pretty big surge from the institutional side of things over the next year or so.
Ian, do you see any, you mentioned in the early days it was entrepreneurs doing white label, packaging, tokenization products, et cetera, that have kind of moved into the space. Do you feel that the move with banks, I mean, we've had a handful of banks on this show who've made very significant strides just in the past year. I guess when you have that much, invested in a banking system, you're really going to kind of put the hammer down. But do you see the potential for entrepreneurs or maybe new fintech companies actually being able to compete in this new sector should, let's say, Bitcoin get above 75K and we start seeing major institutions coming in a big way, maybe as early as Q1? Do you feel like there's going to still be room in the markets for some of these more innovative companies developing products?
Great question. Yeah, I do. I think that Bitcoin was the biggest, the first. It's institutions are finally getting it now, but there's a lot more going on in the blockchain space and cryptocurrency space that there's quite a few niches we see. The people that license our technology, some of them are just your typical kind of fiat to crypto regional
Right.
exchange, but some of them are marketplaces where you're trading on in-game items or other things that um, one might do in a digital marketplace. So that's the kind of entrepreneur clients we're seeing. And then more institutional clients are just kind of adopting what's been happening over the last 4 years or so and the growth in exchanges. So I do see a pretty good opportunity for entrepreneurs. It's not the same as it was 3, 4 years ago.
Sure. Yeah, you're definitely going to have to work a lot harder and get
Mhm.
even more creative in the space, I think, as we start to see it really mature and get into mainstream. We've had here in the US just launched this week, of course, is a new ETF, future traded ETF with Bitcoin. We've seen what was now one of the fastest growth ETF entries into the market. I think it was number 2 all-time history. What does that tell you about the market itself in terms of, is it
Mhm.
demand? Are we seeing a lot of fluff here? What are your thoughts on how that's moving?
I think it's a lot of people waiting for validation. There's still a lot of people that don't feel comfortable with even like the larger exchanges. They want to see something they're more familiar with in a format they're more familiar with in order to get into the asset class.
Yeah,
And I think that there's still a lot of pent up demand there. Um, the institutions I've been talking to that are thinking about doing things in the space, they are they're very confident things would go very well if they just started targeting their client base, and
right.
mostly it's an infrastructure and regulation that's prevented them from doing so. Um, so yeah, I think it's a signal that things are kind of coming around to the people that want those rails and want that legitimacy. Um, that being said, I still think there's a lot of uh, great retail trends and niches that could be um, be pursued.
Yeah. With shift markets, how many of your services will get transferred over into, whether it's banks or institutions or brokerage houses, et cetera, that would be moving on? Because I know you guys have come from more of the entrepreneurial side, which you had to kind of do a lot of that for the entrepreneur who did not have those, those elements in place, whether it was regulatory or just insights to market, those kind of things. I was looking at just some of the comparative services like strategic planning, AML, CTF compliance, things like that. Will all these kinds of services transfer over to what you guys are trying to do now with the institutions, or will you have to create a whole new set of services that will be geared more toward the institutional customer?
Uh, it's there's a lot of new things that we need for the institutional clients. They ask a lot more questions about policy, security, process, um, standards, things that entrepreneurs don't think as much about, and
Right.
institutions have to think about or they focus on. So it's a really different type of client, but there's still a lot of um, like consulting almost that goes into
Yeah.
onboarding a client. Um, so it's just kind of a different sort of flavor to it with, I'd say, more formal structure.
You mentioned that you had a grant that came over from Algorand. We've had some of the Algorand team on here on this show a couple of times. A very innovative project. I continue to support what they're doing. I'm always impressed at just the different moves they're making. Talk to me a little bit about what's happening in that area.
Yeah, we what we see is just in general with finance is more transactions moving on chain. I think that's an area where the institutions haven't really picked up much yet, whereas kind of DeFi and the retail side is pushed forward very, very quickly. Um,
Right.
what we like to do is see more FX transactions moving on chain.
Right.
That we kind of have this history where we've had both experience in products in both asset classes, and they've been a little siloed. Where if we could see more FX transactions or traditional market transactions move on chain, uh, we'd be in a great spot. I think it solves a lot of systematic risk problems in the FX space, especially in the brokerage space. And there's a lot of people that don't want to custody and their assets and when they trade with various brokers, things like that. So yeah, we're building an algorithm to create a product where you could trade FX on chain with some uh, new ways to handle if you're trading on derivatives, new ways to handle liquidation risk, and also ways to push forward into emerging markets and liquidity on currencies that you don't kind of hard to get in the traditional side.
Right. Ian, obviously you're working in that area of new innovation on the blockchain side as it moves into the financial markets even deeper, especially as we get institutional customers and banks really starting to move in this direction. We may see something that we've never seen before, and that is the acceleration of innovation. So in blockchain, obviously with a lot of the companies that we talk to, whether it's a company, we just had Cody on the other day, we'll have Cardano on this week, Polygon, different projects that are really accelerating in DeFi, NFTs, all those kind of things. Now let's take that same kind of innovation, apply it over to the banking and financial institutions. Do you feel like with maybe a product like yours or others, that these institutions entering into the space will really kind of set back and say there's a whole new era of innovation ahead of us? Do you think they're going to take that leap going forward?
I think the ones that aren't as big as the largest banks will have to, just because they know that the biggest banks can buy their way in later. And if they
Right,
want to get ahead, they're going to have to do that. There's an interesting, I think, I'll say culture war, but it's certainly uh, between the sort of the crypto side and the banking side, obviously a very different perspective. And I think the smaller banks that are a little more aggressive will do these sorts of things, and the more um, traditional crypto companies, if there is such a thing, will probably compete with them for sort of general banking services. And you see some of the larger exchanges doing things like this, where they're kind of going after the services you might want to find at a bank, and there's an opportunity for them to take over customers from the banks. And I think they are, especially in emerging markets where
right.
banking is an issue. Um, so I do think that some will, and I think that's probably the right move for them, because I think the customers are leaving pretty quickly, and that's why we're seeing a lot of people kind of pushing the crypto as fast as they can now.
Yeah, well, you hit on something that we've talked about here, and that is if you look back on where the history of crypto has come from, let's forget 2013. We don't want to forget it, but we know that 2013 was the super, super early adopters.
Right.
2017, a lot more innovative entrepreneurs were involved. There were some real players that were coming into the market in 2017 during that bull run. Now we're seeing what appears to be a much more mature business cycle, a lot more involvement. Obviously, we've seen regulatory scenarios come into play. We've seen institutions, family offices, structured capital, major companies like Twitter and Visa, and you could just go down the litany of list, and then countries moving in to sovereign nations and moving into the
Yeah.
use of crypto. When you look at all of that and you think moving forward, especially around the area of whether it's DeFi or some of the services that banks may not be offering right now, because we've looked at like companies like Celsius, Nexo, different crypto lending houses. Then you've got the yield companies out there that are paying ridiculous yields on some of these crypto assets. Do you think the banks will be able to keep up with that kind of innovation level? Because it seems like it's a much more mature market now than it was in 2017.
No, I don't. I don't think they're going to be able to do so without buying them. I mean, there's
Yeah.
been a lot of M&A in the space, and I think that's probably the strategy they'll adopt to keep up. Um, I don't think they're going to be able to keep up with what's happening in DeFi and the services that are offered and the yields and the products. Um, so yeah, but I do think that they'll try, but I think ultimately they'll have to kind of buy their way in.
Yeah. That's going to be good for guys that are in the market
Yeah.
out there, but they've been they've been working at it for a while.
Yeah.
When you think about where the market is moving, Facebook just got their wallet rolled out. They've obviously had some challenges with the cryptocurrency side with Diem. Do you see big major organizations like a Facebook and Amazon? Maybe we start. Obviously, we've seen Twitter and Jack Dorsey and his moving into the space. How much of the corporate entities do you feel may jump into this that have large customer bases in terms of maybe going to a financial product?
Um, I think they want to. I think that there's pretty strong resistance from the rest of the community and regulators for them to try. Um, so I think there's going to be a lot of pressure against that happening, but um, I think that they will definitely try. Um, I don't see them pulling it off, to be honest.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I think that um, there's probably some good partnerships and things like that that they could do to
Right.
to do well with it. I just, them themselves, I think would be, um, I think, difficult.
Yeah. If you're looking at, obviously, you look at the market daily. Is there one particular sector, especially on the institutional side, that you feel will break out first? Whether it's maybe a major trading house, an ETF group that's really trying to get accelerated into a traditional ETF, because that will be coming not far behind what we've seen now with the futures trading. Anything that you're seeing that you think is going to break out first from the institutional side?
Uh, I think I think just some of the wealth management side of things. I think there's a lot of people that want access to information. Honestly, a lot of people don't know where to get information on the market. It's not in
Right.
your traditional media as much.
Hmm.
You see maybe Bitcoin, or you definitely see Bitcoin, but you don't see a lot of other uh, things happening in the traditional media. So there's a big information gap between people that have put most of their money in the stock market or things like that, and they really want to get into crypto, but they really don't know how, and they're going to rely, I think, on people that can tell them what to do and handle the cybersecurity elements and wallets, things like that. I think that's one area. I think there's a lot, but I think that's certainly one area that um, once the services are kind of flipped on, there's a pretty immediate opportunity.
Yeah, I think that you're right. There is a big gap on not only information, the education side. If you think about it, this is really still at this state a very new era in just retail investing. We compare this back to the mid '90s run on the internet, where people were just starting to learn how to use AOL or Alta
Yeah,
Vista or any of those kind of services. And it was very, you're very tentative in your, I was a tech executive in that era in building products for that kind of audience, and you always knew that the run up was going to be a little bit slower. But in this particular case, we've seen this industry growing at about twice the rate of what the internet has been able to grow, obviously due to technology advancement and just information acquisition that's out there. So I would agree with that 100%. If we can overcome that as a market, and really as whether it's U.S. or Europe or some of the major markets that have probably the most to gain here, other than obviously some of the emerging markets have a lot to gain. But if we can overcome that, where do you think the critical mass point will occur? And when I say critical mass, meaning we get to 10% of the population that's active in some sort of crypto investment. Where do you think that is? Is that in our 5-year future, a 2-year future? What are you thinking?
it's very generational split. Like, there's not a lot of people that are near retirement that are getting into it as much.
Right.
A little bit, I think. You see a very big difference between sort of the baby boomer millennial populations. Um,
Hmm.
it's so to get a lot of people that aren't doing it. These things like the ETF and some of these wealth management services will get your kind of 40, 50 plus crowds in
Right,
faster. I think the younger sort of generation's already there.
right.
So it's really kind of siloed in terms of like the critical mass. Yeah, I think it's really. I think I think for everyone going forward, right, coming in and getting starting to earn income is going to be looking at digital assets, and that's almost already happened. There's some services I'd say that could be improved on besides just investing, but like borrowing and lending payments. These things are happening, but to get like kind of everybody, I think that more traditional audience would have to come in with some of these institutions hopping in.
Yeah. Last question for you, and that is, if you look at trends in the category, whether it's, companies employing, their financial standards over to crypto, or blockchain and, evolution and the technology advancement in a lot of different categories, is there one trend that you guys are watching that you feel like, hey, this is really something we should be watching very closely in the next, short period of time?
Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of trends. I think that I'd be really curious to see in the next 6 months which of the larger institutions do really pick it up and
Yeah,
um, offer it to their users, whether it be a large tech company or a large financial institution. I think they're both heading that way,
yeah.
um, but it's a little bit of a race, and it's also who can pull it off and really not uh, alienate the culture of people that already have embraced it. And I think that's a fine line, and
Yeah.
we see it a lot where a product will come out and it won't get touched, right? Because it's too tradfi or what have you. Um, so you really want to make sure that your products and services are tailored at least to some extent to the early adopters. I think
Hmm.
that's where there's going to be a lot of people who miss the mark. And if they do that, then they're only going to get sort of that older generation that might put some money in, but they're going to miss out, I think, on a big part of the future.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation, and I think you're dead on with that. Is that transition or that handshake that's going to have to occur with traditional finance and a lot of the brokerage houses? I trade in both, and you're exactly right. I'm a little bit more on the rarity crowd because I'm usually coaching my age group more so to get into crypto and
Right.
trying to get them, moving into that. But when you're a kind of tech leaning person, you understand it. It's fine. But you're
Right.
right. That handoff between most of that demographic that's going to be in that midlife area, they're still in a very big part of their investing cycle. So there's still a lot of potential asset gains for them, especially with what we're seeing in crypto. So I think you're dead on with where this market's going to be. It'll be interesting to see which institution can pull it off, because that will be a coup for sure if they can do it. Uh, it's great having you on the show, Ian. Good luck to what you guys are doing over at Shift Markets. I can't wait to see how this all plans out for you. I really want to see the movements of how your tech starts to move in some of these institutions for sure. But thanks for stopping in on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Paul.
All right. So you guys are tuned in right now on the podcast. Make sure and of course give us some likes over there. Great to, by the way, big audience on Spotify. Thanks for all the love over there. But right here is where you're going to catch all the real action, and that is the chart analysis, the insights, the executive interviews. A lot of our real inside coverage that we do is here on YouTube. So the best thing to do is jump over to YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and just search Paul Barron Network. You'll find us and jump in because that's the number one way you're going to find content on understanding blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and really the future of not only investing but technology. And that's really what this show is all about. Don't forget, join the Diamond Circle. It's free for you guys to join. We do a ton of really cool stuff. Check it out. both on education. We do some crypto assets and some digital asset rewards. So it's another way we pay back our community. If you guys want to hit me up on Twitter, you can do so at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.